So welcome to a video lesson titled Modern Agricultural Practices. Well, unless you're living under a rock, there's been a lot in the news these days about our modern agricultural practices and how they really have become a problem. But let's go back to the beginning. Our original hunter-gatherer humans came on the scene about 2.5 million years ago. But this period of time, from 2.5 million years to about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, represents the Paleolithic Era. During that era, we know from paleontological evidence that these people were very healthy. They had healthy lifestyles. Now, many people will argue with me and say, well, they didn't live long. Okay, fine, they didn't live long, but they weren't dying from heart attacks and stroke and diabetes. They were dying from murder. They were dying from injuries. They were dying from infections. Women died in childbirth. And children often died from starvation. So the lifespan and the mortality of these people was very fitting for what they lived. And we also know that current hunter-gatherers on our planet right now, they live to a very, very nice, ripe old age of their 60s, 70s, and 80s, just like modern people. So we know that early hunter-gatherers would have lived very long. Then we go into the next era, which was the Neolithic Era. And this was the onset of agriculture and animal domestication. Came on the scene about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago and lasted up until about 150 years ago. This is when we first had our farmers and modern irrigation techniques. This started in northern Africa and throughout the Middle East. These were the first community settlements of human beings, where they were no longer nomadic people, and they started having permanent settlements. Population on the planet exploded and started going into the millions at that point in time, mainly because of the onset of grains. Grains can feed a lot of people. Community health-based practices were very low and poor in the beginning. Sanitation, infection control, which caused people to figure out ways to allow people to be healthier, living in small communities. Kosher practices came up around that time, as well as keeping people from having infection from sexually transmitted diseases and other diseases. And then we come up to about 150 years ago to 200 years ago, the onset of the Industrial Revolution. This is when our food supply really started becoming less healthy. We started domesticating animals and moving them off of their grazing pastures and putting them onto small confined areas. We started feeding them grain rather than allowing them to eat their natural diet, which is grass, which increased the yield based on mechanical farming practices. That's when we started with processed oils and refined grains and sugar. In the beginning, grains were milled by using stone. During the Industrial Revolution, grains were milled with steel rollers, which means it can grind the grain into a fine, fine powder, which turns into sugar even faster when you eat it. This is also when we started processing foods and developing pre-packaged foods. Nabisco, Kraft. This is around the time these companies started to form. Now we come up to the modern age with the low-fat craze, which was actually the result about 30 years ago of a poor interpretation of one study. We now know that the low-fat craze is very unhealthy. We should not be eating low-fat foods. We should be eating high-fat foods, even saturated fats, but not in the form of French fries, McDonald's, and Burger King. The modern age also brought with it genetically modified wheat, which is the result for a desire of a higher yield product. It's all about money. It used to take wheat a full year to grow, from being planted to being harvested. But now we can do that in about 2 or 3 months. So therefore, the product that we're growing is far less in nutritional value. Nature just cannot give you a high nutritional value in such a short period of time. And we can thank the genetic modification of wheat and other products for that. Unfortunately, in the United States of America, we do not have laws that demand that the consumer is notified when they're eating a genetically modified food. However, in many other countries, they do. The European Union and Japan are two areas, off the top of my head, that I know no longer want to buy American wheat, because they do have laws in their country that demand the consumer be notified when they're eating a genetically modified organism. We also have concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. This is where we put animals in small containers rather than allowing them to go outside and live their lives. We give them antibiotics so that if one gets sick, they don't all die. We also give them hormones so that they get big and fat real fast. So we give them growth hormones and steroids. This causes a fat, sick, diabetic animal to be brought to slaughter, whether it's chicken, turkey, beef, lamb, pork. The meat has a very low nutritional value also. You have to realize what these animals are supposed to eat according to nature, and what we give them causes them to become very sick. And also, pesticides are killing our bees. So this is another product of the modern era. That's the reason to go organic, not because it has more health benefits. Broccoli is still going to be healthy, whether you eat organic broccoli or not. But the more we do not use organic vegetables in our cooking, the more we buy vegetables that are not grown organically, the more pesticides are used. So not only are you eating those pesticides, but we're killing our bees. When we eat a lot of pesticides and other toxins in our diet, our bodies are supposed to prevent us from absorbing them into our bloodstream. However, there's something called leaky gut syndrome. This happens when people are overweight, obese, or have diabetes, because that high level of inflammation causes leaky gut syndrome. What that means is that your body will be more able to absorb toxins and pesticides into your bloodstream. We don't know the fallout of this, but if you ask me, maybe that's another reason why people are getting so much cancer. There's got to be a fallout from it somewhere. We just don't know what it is. So the modern age brings with it a lot of bad, negative things into our food supply and water supply. So please, look for healthier versions of food when you go grocery shopping. Watch my other video lessons, especially the ones on nutrition and paleo eating patterns, and learn more about what you should eat and what you should avoid. Thank you. I'm Christine Olivieri, your paleo practitioner.